Praise be to Jesus Christ, and welcome to Catholic Forum. I'm your guest host, Alan Dunst, and we're just so happy to have you with us today. We hope that our conversation here in West Michigan finds you wherever you may be and draws you a little bit closer to Jesus Christ through His one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Before we get started today, I do want to give a little bit of a warning. Normally our conversations are pretty G-rated, but today we are in fact going to be talking about some more mature subject matter, kind of putting the church in the bedroom, as it were. Many people would prefer that the church stay out of the arena of sexuality. You may have seen signs along the lines of keep your rosary beads off of my ovaries and things of that nature. Unfortunately, many of the people who are carrying those signs are viewing the child within the womb as a sort of intruder, as it were, almost a disease or a parasite as they pursue its removal in the name of women's health, as opposed to understanding that the womb is in fact nature's grand home prepared especially for that child. So while many would consider the church obsessed with sex, I would think the argument could be made that the church is less obsessed with sex than the culture at large, and that what the church is really obsessed with is love and the fact that humankind has been created as a moral agent by God to reflect that love and to offer that love through their bodies in a manner that is consistent with the nature with which God created us. So we're going to explore that a little bit today, particularly in contrast to contraception. We're going to be talking about natural family planning, or NFP. Before we get started, I do want to kind of set the stage by reading a little bit of the Catechism, paragraph 2370, which says, periodic continence, that is, the methods of birth regulation based on self-observation and the use of infertile periods, is in conformity with the objective criteria of morality. These methods respect the bodies of the spouses, encourage tenderness between them, and favor the education of an authentic freedom. In contrast, every action which, whether in anticipation of the conjugal act or in its accomplishment or in the development of its natural consequences, proposes, whether as an end or as a means, to render procreation impossible, is intrinsically evil. So we're going to kind of explore what are those natural means of regulating birth. And we have a couple of fantastic people here to help us do that. We have Julie Cook,
yes,
and her husband David. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, we're so glad to have you with us, and we really appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. So let's start with kind of the beginning, your introduction to NFP. When did you become aware of what NFP was and how it was practiced and such?
Well, as a cradle Catholic growing up, my parents did a very good job of communicating basic concepts of church teaching when it comes to sexuality. No sex before marriage. They got that message loud and clear through to me. But somehow along the way, I missed the message that contraception was wrong. And so by the time I got to be a junior or senior in high school, I was still kind of in line with the general culture, thinking, well, this is just the responsible way that an adult plans their family, is with contraception. And I remember very clearly sitting at the kitchen table one day and seeing a copy of our Sunday Visitor newspaper sitting there. I opened it up and I said, Mom, this article says that contraception is wrong. She goes, well, yeah. And I said, when were you going to tell me? And she thought that she had, and maybe she did, and I just forgot. But either way, it just blew me away. I was like, wow, this is so countercultural. This is fascinating. And so from that point forward, I kind of became obsessed with that whole concept. Moving into college when I met Dave and we eventually got engaged, my brother gave us a copy of some Christopher West CDs that were titled Naked Without Shame, which was quite an eye-opening title. I'm like, really? This is our wedding gift? Okay. But they were amazing. They took my understanding of church sexual teaching from a legalistic, this is what the church teaches, you will do it, no questions asked, it made it flourish into a completely integrated understanding of what it means to participate with God's plan based on how he designed our bodies and how to be in communion with each other in a marriage and with him. It was just astonishing. So.
And we probably should let our viewers know, if they're not familiar with Christopher West, that he is probably one of the foremost apostles of what Pope John Paul II's teaching on theology of the body, which is a whole anthropology of our basically the unity of body and spirit and soul, and how that is reflected in our humanity. So it's wonderful stuff. So excellent starting point there. David, what did you think about that?
Well, I wasn't raised Catholic. I was a convert, and I converted shortly after I met Julie, maybe a year or two after. And we rocked out to Naked Without Shame. And at first, when I read the back of the CD, it said the Pope's teaching of Humani Vitae, and I thought, oh, well, this is going to be a bore. And how long do I have to listen to this? I'm going to be asleep before it's even started. But Christopher West just has a really good way of taking a very dense theology and kind of breaking it down to very kind of pragmatic terms for the normal layperson. And I'm all about just kind of, cutting through a lot of the thicket and just getting to the point. And I felt like he could do that really well. And it was something that just kind of caught me as, wow, there's another option out there. There's natural methods that actually work, and they're in line with church teaching.
Tell us about maybe how when you first started practicing it, what were some of the hurdles that you had to overcome in terms of integrating it into your daily life and marital life?
You can answer.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
We used it right when we got married. There wasn't a time where we said, well, let's try something else for a while. It was kind of right out of the gate. And when we first got married, I was in graduate school. Julie had a kind of, first out of college job. We lived in a very small apartment in the state of Wyoming. And it was just kind of a time in our lives where we said, let's live for a couple years. Let's get ourselves established before we have kids. And I remember taking our first NFP course and being kind of bewildered by what I perceived to be a lot of rules, kind of around phase one. There's different rules based on where the woman is in her cycle. And I told Julie, I think our circumstance is such that we're not near home, we don't have any family nearby, I'm in school, we don't have a lot of money. I would really, if possible, like to avoid pregnancy for the next couple of years. And so we were able to kind of use NFP, which is more or less fertility awareness, Al, and tell ourselves, we know where we are in the cycle. We know what sort of the more conservative way to follow the rule is. And Julie and I decided kind of at the get-go, we were going to be more conservative with the method than we could have been.
Okay.
And so the term more conservative, let's just be blunt, it means more abstinence throughout an average monthly cycle as opposed to less abstinence.
Oh, okay.
And 10 years later, we're still married. We still like each other. It didn't ruin our marriage. In fact, that is something that is really counterintuitive. A lot of people think, oh, abstinence kills a marriage. It's so harmful. Not necessarily. Not if you approach it with the right mentality. And NFP users have only a 2 to 5% divorce rate. So clearly there's something there. There's obviously it's not a death sentence if you've got to have a week and a half of abstinence every month. NFP users have also been polled and report having more satisfying sex as opposed to people who contracept. And over the course of a month, they tend to have as much sex as in terms of quantity as anyone else. So if not more. It's definitely not a death sentence to a marriage by any means.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would kind of tick those off as their expectations of that NFP. So that's actually very fascinating, interesting information. Now, eventually, you became instructors. Moved from
Yes.
practitioners to instructors. Tell us about that transition and how that came about.
Well, we went through medical school. Just kidding.
Oh, no.
Julie can tell the story better than I can.
Oh my
but
gosh.
it was quite of an intensive period of about 3 to 4 months. Every night we took a self-paced training course where we would go online, we'd watch a bunch of instructional videos, and then we would have to more or less prove our competence by taking online tests and getting a certain score within a certain period of time. After that kind of formalized training was done, we actually had to teach in front of another teaching couple just to make sure that they were comfortable with us. We are licensed and insured by Couple to Couple League International. They are a sponsoring organization. There are other organizations that sponsor NFP, but they're kind of our mothership, for lack of a better word. They take care of a lot of the administration for the course, a lot of the registration, and then once we have participants, we kind of take it from there.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and in terms of being called to become teachers, we had been kind of informally giving presentations at a church we were at in northern New York for several years about theology of the body. And afterwards, people kept coming up to us and saying, "You would make such great NFP teachers. You should really consider it." I wanted nothing to do with it. I thought that the requirements were too strict. It would be just too much of a hassle, too difficult. But it really wasn't. It turned out to be a lot better than we thought. And can't imagine not having incorporated this into our lives. The people that we've met, the experiences that we've had over the past 7 years of teaching are just invaluable.
Awesome. And now, before we go into talking about NFP in particular, I understand, Dave, you actually have a kind of an interesting twist to your story in coming
I
to
do.
NFP. Tell us about
Yeah,
that.
I think I mentioned before I'm a convert,
Right.
and my family did not convert with me. It was something I did on my own with Julie, and when we got engaged, I told my parents the conversation of what are you going to do to regulate your burst came up. And I told them, well, we're going to try this thing known as NFP. And it was, oh, okay, well, that's nice. What is your backup plan? Because this isn't going to work. And my response was, this is something that I feel called to try. And it's something that I know is in line with the Catholic Church's teaching. And I feel like we're going to get good instruction. I kind of know what we're doing. And I'm willing to kind of put my faith on the line and try it out. And it's worked well for us. And over the years, my parents actually told me that they have had infertility issues. And they were told by their doctor to buy a basal body thermometer temperature and for my mother to take her temperature every morning when she woke up. And to chart those temperatures on a chart, very much like we would tell our students, and to try to time intercourse around the time before the temperature rose, but after menstruation. And I told my mother this, and I said, do you know that we instruct our couples to do exactly the same thing, plus a cervical mucus observation? And the response I got back was, it cannot be the same thing. I cannot believe it. And so it cast a light in that NFP is fertility awareness. It's using the knowledge of where you are in your cycle to say, I want to try to conceive, or I want to try not to conceive. And so the medical community is recommending and prescribing the fertility awareness methods to try to conceive, but not looking at it from the opposite standpoint of saying, well, if it works for that way scientifically, why can't we just apply the opposite logic and say, let's try to avoid pregnancy?
Right. And it does seem to be, many people seem to feel like it's too much work.
Right. Right. It's really not. I mean, there is a learning curve initially, as with anything, but eventually it becomes a habit. There's a routine. It's kind of like tying your shoes. Like, wake up, stick the thermometer in your mouth. The thermometer will save your temperature. You don't have to record it that exact instant. You can get back to it whenever you want to. It's no different than having to take your pill at the same time every day. Right. Otherwise, you lose your effectiveness. Same thing with the thermometer. It's really no different.
Right. Tell us about, let's kind of get into the actual nuts and bolts, as it were, of NFP. Now, my understanding is NFP is actually kind of shorthand for a number of different methods.
Yes.
So let's kind of break those down.
Okay. Well, let's do a little brief history lesson. Of course, rhythm method is the most notorious of the natural methods. We've all heard the jokes. What do you call natural family planning or rhythm method users? Parents. I've heard that joke so many times I could recite it in my sleep. So of course that one is the one that everybody loves to poke fun at. There's also a couple of variations of that. Standard days and cycle beads are kind of similar in theory to that as well. And then we have the more modern, effective, reliable methods, such as the symptothermal method, which we teach, and we also have Creighton, Billings ovulation, and Marquette methods. Now, the difference between symptothermal and the other methods are symptothermal involves the temperature, which we already mentioned, when you wake up in the morning, in addition to cervical mucus, which I realize makes some people squeamish, but it's a natural bodily fluid, just like the mucus in your nose. You get used to it after a while. The other methods are primarily mucus-based, and especially Creighton and Billings are particularly good at helping diagnose underlying infertility issues such as PCOS, low thyroid, other hormonal imbalances such as that.
Oh, interesting.
So kind of you get a whole scope of options. You're not just limited to one type of NFP. If one just really isn't convenient for you, you're not getting the insight that you want with it, there are other methods that can help.
And a lot of these modern methods, Al, are shown to be 99.5% effective. There have been several studies published in scientific journals. One that comes to mind is the GNOTH study, G-N-O-T-H, from Germany in 2007. They took a group of about, I think, 2,000 to 3,000 couples and followed them to make sure that they were following the method correctly. And after about a year of using the method, they found that only about 0.5% of the couples became pregnant through the use of the natural method. So it compares very favorably to other forms of unnatural birth regulation that are out there on the market today.
And one last thing to note, if you were to Google natural family planning right now, you would get, for your top couple of results, you'd get some statistics that aren't necessarily at the 98 to 99% effectiveness that we were just saying. They're going to be in the 80 to 85% range, and you're going to be like, that doesn't sound right. And that's because when it comes to natural methods, typically what happens is all natural methods on the face of the earth are lumped into a single statistic. So rhythm, cycle beads, standard days, symptothermal. If it's natural in any way, shape, or form, it's considered part of that. So it dilutes the effectiveness. It's kind of like lumping together too many colors of Play-Doh. You get this ugly color at the end, you can't tell what's good and what's not, you just have this ugly color. So you don't want to overmix, you want to be able to single out the modern, more effective ones that we teach.
Gotcha. We talked a little bit about it, but let's talk about what it does for couples. You mentioned some interesting statistical ramifications. Does that increase communication, or what is it about
Absolutely.
NFP that is drawing because it takes two, and then it's not like it's all just a woman. Right?
Yeah, you hit right on it. It's all about that open communication. Julie has irregular cycles, and I think a lot of our viewers may be listening to this and thinking, oh, that's nice for somebody that has standard cycles. Not the case. It's really custom tailored to what your body is doing at a certain point in time. So it's a conversation maybe every month, or if you're having irregular cycles, maybe every 2 months or less than that, of saying, where am I at? Where are we at in our marriage? Do we feel that we have the financial means? Are we prepared emotionally? Do we have the stability to bring a life into this world? And it's having that conversation month after month and saying, revisiting, where are we at? What can we do to improve our situation? Or what do we need to fix that might be going on health-wise? And with taking a pill or having something inserted into your body, you don't always have that kind of avenue of, automatic check, where are we at every month. It more or less puts that conversation on autopilot. Because of the increased communication, there have been several studies that have found that the divorce rate among NFP users is substantially lower than the population as a whole.
Right.
I believe the rate is somewhere between 2 and 4% as compared to over 50%.
Yeah, when you hear that, that divorce rate is thrown out there so often, right? 50%.
Yeah.
So when you hear 2 to 4%.
Yeah, single digits, no less.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like, I want some of that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so it's really
Yeah.
surprising that more people aren't aware of that benefit.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, there's not too many. I understand that, you know, today it's getting a little tougher, but I don't know that many people who want to enter into marriage thinking that this is going to last for about 20 minutes.
Sure,
Yeah,
right.
No,
You
no.
know, most people go into it with the best of intentions, and to think that this method has the
Yeah.
power.
It's like a built-in safety net, kind of, or built-in marriage insurance, as we like to call it. I like to also say, if you can talk about cervical mucus, you can talk about anything.
That's right,
I
yes.
promise you. It's true.
Indeed. Are there any other, say, misconceptions that you encounter about
Absolutely.
NFP that we should probably dispel?
I have been accused of being uneducated by promoting natural methods. And to those people, I ask, do you know what a luteal phase is? Do you know how to determine what a woman's luteal phase is? Do you know how to recognize a progesterone deficiency on a chart or a low thyroid problem? Do you know how the luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, progesterone, estrogen, all vary throughout a cycle? What effect does this have on cervical mucus and waking temperature? Do I still sound uneducated? So yeah, that's one of the things that I hear a lot is, you know, it's old like cave science, you know, from the Stone Age, and it is anything but.
Right.
So.
I think a lot of the misconception I hear, at least from guys, is, oh, well, it's not effective. I don't want to have a lot of kids. And I think that feeling comes from kind of a lack of control. A lot of guys want to have control, you know, this is the way I'm planning my life. And if their wives are doing a lot of the charting, they feel kind of out of control. And NFP, like I said before, is kind of open communication. I can open up Julie's chart whenever I want and look at it and actually tell myself, well, I know that I'm going to plan a romantic evening for tonight. So it's kind of the misconception of, well, you know, we teach somebody something, they don't know what they're doing. That's not it at all. There's tons of resources out there. It's shown scientifically, it's been in medical journals that are peer-reviewed, that it is just as effective as, say, the birth control pill or the IUD.
Plus all these other benefits.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk about your training. I don't know, do you train, are you teaching out of a particular parish, or how's that working? How do you get to, you know, people attend to your classes?
We are with Holy Spirit Church on Lake Michigan Drive on the west side. So we have a really good relationship with our priest there. He lets us put up posters on the bulletin boards and ads in the bulletin once in a while promoting it. So we kind of get the word out that way. We also speak at pre-Cana presentations at church, but primarily we get students from online registration.
Okay.
So they go to the Couple League website, ccli.org, and they go to search or register for classes. They can search by zip code. They can either choose to look for live courses in person or online, or a self-paced option. And then when they click search, they'll get dozens of choices based on their criteria. And the main course that we teach is a series of 3 classes. Each one is spaced about a month apart to give couples time to practice their charting in between sessions.
Okay.
And then we also have transition sessions for postpartum and premenopause, which are 1 session each.
Okay.
So those are also available online.
Wow.
People wouldn't normally contact us, Al. They would go out to our parent organization, Couple to Couple League, which is ccli.org, and they would search for a class near them. If there isn't a course near them, we get a lot of couples from North Dakota just comes to mind. It's kind of a very rural area, and a lot of dioceses out in the western U.S. especially have a requirement that students who are getting married in the Catholic Church have to take a course.
Yeah.
So we'll get a lot of people, even though we're based in Michigan, that say, well, you know, Dave and Julie are offering this class. It's at a time I can make it, so I'm going to set it up. And the online courses, they're live, so people can actually see us, they can talk to us and interact with us. It's more or less a PowerPoint presentation, and then there's time for Q&A, and there's interaction in there.
Awesome.
We've taught people all across the U.S. in different time zones, including Guam, which I guess is like maybe a day behind, so that's been
Almost.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. The N in NFP is natural, and actually you have had to encounter kind of the opposite side of that coin. And so let's talk about that, because it's actually a very powerful witness in your lives, in that you are practicing and teaching this method that is used to for fertility, and you've actually struggled with infertility, and yet have chosen, again in line with church teaching, to deal with it naturally, as opposed to pursuing things like surrogacy or in vitro fertilization or any of these things that people tend to use nowadays, which I think one can argue both discounts the humanity and kind of commoditizes our children,
Sure.
as opposed to receiving them as gifts, right? So talk about that situation and how you've dealt with that.
It's kind of an irony, I guess, that we're here teaching couples to be very fecund and very just, populating the earth, and we don't have any kids. We have secondary.
God has a sense of humor.
He does. We have secondary infertility. We can conceive. We've had several miscarriages, but through kind of that sort of discernment of having a family, when we first got married, it was let's not have kids for a while, and then maybe 3 or 4 years into it, it was let's try. Oh my gosh, it's not working. And then it's back to kind of an acceptance of, this is what God has planned for our lives. I know Julie maybe want to talk a little bit more about that.
Right. There was a period of time of bitterness toward God, and or feeling as if not having children was a sign that He did not love us. And I feel like that might be behind a lot of couples' drive to try to grasp for that gift, because without it, it's like, well, where's my purpose in life? Does God really love me? Where's the sign that He loves me? So it is a good desire, but it's just, we can't have the ends justify the means.
Right, yeah.
Just as we can't have them justify the means with avoiding children, we also can't have them justify the means with trying to conceive them.
Right.
And at one point, it just dawned on me, it became so clear that there will be people everywhere who either A, end up with more children than they originally intended, or like us, B, have fewer than they originally intended. And in both circumstances, you have to come to terms and graciously accept God's will, that it is for the best, it's all for a purpose, and it's two sides of the same coin. You have to graciously accept it. So it kind of ties into it, even though ironically we don't have the 5 kids that we originally wanted when we got married. We can still, it's amazing how God works, we can still tie in the lessons that still promote a culture of life.
Sure. You actually have a website
Yes.
that kind of addresses some of these questions of the naturalness of how we pursue our sexuality, our fertility. What's the website?
It is sacrilegeyousay.com.
Sacrilegeyousay.com. And from your website, I actually learned that religion is not the end of sacrilege. It's not sacrilege. It's sacrilege.
Yeah.
SACRILEGE.
That's right.
YOUSAY.
That's right. Yep.
And actually, one of your cartoons actually was picked up by a better known site called churchpop.com recently. They're very irreverent and interesting takes, and you realize that when they talk about sacrilege, we're not talking about kind of profaning religion as much as we're kind of taking on what society passes as reason in terms of those kind of...
Basically never goes, no one ever questions it.
Right. So it's a fun site, so I encourage our viewers to take a look at that. But we're running out of time, but I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Al.
And we thank you for your time as well. And we hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, we'll be praying for you in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Qui a te